Hey everyone, Mike here. PVC, or polyvinyl chloride, is quite a versatile material when you think about it. While it was first synthesized in 1872 by German chemist Eugen Baumann, it wasn't usable in commercial products until 1926. This was when Waldo Semen and the B.F. Goodrich Company developed a method to plastize PVC with various additives. Nowadays, PVC has several applications, including insulation for cables and plumbing for water systems, among others. But what about figures of Mario?
Toys to Life games and figures, the number 3 most popular use for PVC, just behind cables and pipes. These games involve using figures to make something happen in the game. These figures are bought separately, and they either let you play as the character the figure is modeled after, or unlock some cosmetics in some games. These were a fad starting in the early 2010s, but are pretty much dead as far as I'm concerned, with an obvious exception. More on that later. Most of the franchises that made use of these have been abandoned and don't get updates or new figures anymore, so at this point, I'd say they are mostly dead. Today, we're going to talk about where this concept originated from, the history of the concept and when it hit its peak, and then where the concept is today, aka the graveyard.
Most people will tell you Skylanders was what started the Toys to Life craze, but that's not entirely true. I'll get to how Skylanders made the Toys to Life concept skyrocket in a bit, but just note that it wasn't the first series or game to use this idea. The first game to use Toys to Life was a PC game called UB Funkies. Okay, well technically Webkins was the first game to do this, but UB Funkies was the first to use figures instead of stuffed animals. Contrary to the game's name, I do not indeed be funky. The figures were made by toy manufacturer Mattel, with the game being designed and developed by Radica Games and Arcadium respectively.
This 2007 MMO involved plugging in this monkey thing called the Hub to your computer via USB. You'd then put the figures that you bought on top of this thing's head to play as them in the game. From what I got out of the trailers, it seemed different funkies did different things in the game, and some allowed you to unlock more worlds to go to.
Like many MMOs, this game died after just a few years, in this case in 2010. I think it's safe to say it was phased out by other games that were making a splash, like Club Penguin, which was on the rise to popularity at the time, and other games were available, like Toontown and Fusion Fall, among others. I've never heard of this game before, which I guess is a testament to how unpopular this game ended up being. If you want to see an expanded video talking about UB Funkies, I recommend checking out this video by Billiam. The link will be in the eye icon at the top right corner of the screen. For mobile users, the link will be in the description down below. I really recommend his content, as he talks about old media like this very often, so it's a nice walk down memory lane. As many of us know, the Toys to Life concept didn't get popular until Skylanders hit the scene in 2011 with Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, or as most people refer to it now as, oh yeah, I've seen those figures at GameStop. I owned the first game and had 6 figures, 3 of which being from the starter pack. I never really bought many figures as I didn't really have a desire to collect all of them, and I was an 11-year-old with no money. Fun fact, Skylanders wasn't even supposed to be its own brand. The game was originally going to be a second attempt at reviving the Spyro the Dragon series, and it would have been the start of a new trilogy, hence the subtitle Spyro's Adventure. Obviously we now know that wasn't the case, as Skylanders propelled the Toys to Life financial model into the mainstream. And I'll be the one to admit it, I didn't even know who Spyro was until I played this game. I know, I'm uncultured, and I'm sorry.
Skylanders was pretty fun when I played it, although I was 11, so my standards for quality were pretty low. The games involved you putting a figure on the Portal of Power to insert your figure into the game and play as them. This always seemed cool to me, the way the portal would light up after placing a character. It really felt like you were in control of the creatures, which is probably where my superiority complex comes from. The gameplay is fairly basic. It's an action-adventure platformer. However, the levels aren't designed so a jump button isn't necessary, so it's a weird kind of platformer that doesn't have jumping. Your goal is to collect parts for a core of light so you can destroy Chaos, a short guy with a temper and a knack for causing chaos. So that's why they call him that.
In the 5 years after Spyro's Adventure was released, a new Skylanders game was released yearly. It's plain to see why. The first game sold really well, accumulating over $500 million in retail sales as of December 2012. With numbers like that, it'd be crazy not to make a sequel. However, this is what led to Skylanders fading out of the public eye. It doesn't take a genius to know that making 5 sequels within 5 years creates oversaturation for the franchise, half-baked ideas, and in Skylanders' case, floods the market with toys from multiple different series. Imagine if movie franchises pumped out movies like that. Oh wait, to the developers' credit, they did have some interesting ideas. The third game in the series, Swap Force, featured figures that had swappable parts, so you can mix and match your own characters. I always thought this was a neat concept, and I'm sure it would have been appreciated a lot more if it wasn't rushed to be the yearly Skylanders game in 2013. Skylanders was a great idea that had a lot of potential, but the mentality of making multiple sequels in such a short time really made the series feel watered down. Who could have possibly had such a greedy mindset for a series with so much potential? Huh. All makes sense now. Well, the creatures are fun and all, but I want to play a game with more recognizable characters. If only there was a company that had an endless arsenal of intellectual properties to work with.
Disney Infinity was a sandbox game that, you guessed it, had Disney IPs as playable characters. The entire purpose and marketing point of the game was you could use your imagination to customize your world with all kinds of Disney characters. This game was developed by Avalanche Software, who had a history of making licensed games based on Disney properties since 2005, so the choice to have them develop this game made sense.
I never played this game, as I never really care that much about Disney movies, but I could understand the appeal that this game had. Disney Infinity was released in 2013, so you already know they were trying to capitalize on the Toys to Life genre that Skylanders was making a splash in at the time. I mean, in 2013, Skylanders was at its peak with Swap Force. Why wouldn't they try to throw their hat in the ring? And who has more characters to work with than Disney? Yes, it seems the stars were aligning for Disney to take that sweet, sweet market share. So how'd the game do? I bet you expected me to make a joke saying that it flopped, but the truth is that it actually got mostly decent reviews, and supposedly version 1.0 and its toys brought in over $500 million, according to a Eurogamer article.
Without even considering the sales numbers, as much as I love data, it's obvious this would sell really well. The fundamental gameplay concept is that you play as a variety of Disney characters in a sandbox environment. In said environment, what you can make is as limited as one's imagination. It sounds cliche, and it really is, but that was the big selling point, and by God, did that work. Disney Infinity had a lot going for it, and it was fairly strong in the only 2 years it got updates. With the introduction of version 2.0, the game introduced playsets for various Marvel characters, including the Avengers, Spider-Man, and the Guardians of the Galaxy properties. In the game's final iteration, 3.0, Disney brought Star Wars into the mix while also adding characters that coincided with a couple film releases at the time, those being Finding Dory and Inside Out.
So with all this upward momentum, what happened? Well, according to an article by Kotaku, multiple factors were working against Disney Infinity at the time. The first was toy stock. The first line of Disney Infinity figures went through a stock shortage as Disney didn't anticipate the high demand the figures would accumulate. This set manufacturing of the toys back by months, so things weren't looking very good for the brand. They later fixed this with 2.0 by releasing an abundance of 2.0 figures, but they quickly ran into the opposite problem. They made way too many. When Kotaku reached out to an anonymous industry source, they said the following. The expectation was that the brand would grow and they would sell more units and toys. It's hard to put in perspective how big of a failure this was since all those additional units were added to the books destroyed any chance for 2.0 to be profitable. In an attempt to remedy the hole Disney was digging themselves into, they introduced backwards compatibility with 2.0's Marvel playsets, allowing Marvel characters from 1.0 to be used in future expansions. This was done to incentivize consumers to purchase the old 1.0 figures so that they could clear more stock. But this didn't exactly work on the scale they hoped for. That's not to say the 2.0 figures sold poorly, they made over $200 million, but at that point, the damage had already been done with the stock issues. In addition to the stock of figures fluctuating, Disney also had way too high of expectations for the brand. In the quote that I just read, it said they expected the brand would grow and would result in more sales for units and toys. Now, that's a reasonable expectation on paper. Disney set their estimates way too high, though. When Disney originally released Infinity, they predicted it would be a billion-dollar empire. To see the first game make half that probably upset the higher-ups, as it didn't meet their otherwise absurd expectations, even if it is Disney. Okay, well, stock issues and lofty estimates, that's all Disney dealt with, right? Nope. The last reason is a common one you'll see for games in the Toys to Life genre: competition. Obviously, Skylanders was at its peak in 2013, so Disney already had a rival in the Toys to Life market to play against. However, what Disney didn't know was that in about a year, another big figure line would take the media by storm. At E3 2014, the world was introduced to the Amiibo line of figures from Nintendo. I know what you're thinking. Mike, these aren't truly Toys to Life figures. How could they even compete with Disney Infinity or Skylanders? You'd be right to ask that question, however. The answer is written on the wall. Not this one. Think about it. Nintendo has been referred to as the Disney of the gaming industry numerous times. Some might go as far as to say that Mario is more recognizable than Mickey Mouse. It only makes sense that Amiibo was an instant hit.
For the uninformed, let me get you up to speed. Amiibo are Toys to Life figures that do a variety of different things depending on what game you scan them in. The biggest selling point was their compatibility in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, as those games let you train an Amiibo to fight. In other games, however, Amiibo varied in terms of functionality. Mario Kart 8 unlocked Nintendo-themed racing suits for your Mii, Yoshi's Woolly World had costumes for pretty much every Smash Amiibo, and Mario Party 10 relied on these figures to actually play the game.
I didn't say all the uses were equally valuable.
Amiibo were incredible since they could work with multiple different games and there were so many to collect. The only problem is, there were so many. You had your Smash line, which was already hefty enough with there being 58 characters in Smash 4, and even more characters being added to this day because of Ultimate, but Nintendo just kept cranking out different series of Amiibo for pretty much every first-party release. There were lines dedicated to franchises like Mario and Zelda, there were bundles that included an Amiibo with certain games like Twilight Princess HD and the Mega Man Legacy Collection, and then there were way too many Animal Crossing figures. Oh, and there was that one time where Nintendo turned into your grandma and made an Amiibo out of yarn.
Yeah, the stock was a major issue with Amiibo, going back to when the first wave was released. I'm sure history textbooks probably reflect on the Amiibo shortages at this point, so I won't go too far down the rabbit hole. Basically what happens is that with every wave of Amiibo, there were a few that ended up being very rare. Some examples from the early Amiibo days were Marth, Little Mac, and Captain Falcon. These stock issues caused a lot of controversies, and it took quite a while for Nintendo to get their together to do reprints of specific figures. If you didn't want to wait for your character to get a reprint, your alternative was to import from another country. For some reason, it was only North America that had stock issues. Most other countries had an abundance of what we called rare figures. I said at the beginning of this video that the Toys to Life genre is basically dead, with an exception. Well, this is it. Amiibo are still being made today, however the stock issues are still quite the issue, with more recent examples being the Loftwing Amiibo for Skyward Sword HD, as well as the Metroid Dread Amiibo that are coming out later this year. What I'm saying is that Nintendo was a big competitor in the Toys to Life market, as they had an arsenal of recognizable characters just like Disney, as well as being a veteran of the gaming industry. So you've got a new IP with Skylanders, established media juggernaut Disney, and gaming industry veteran Nintendo, all making Toys to Life figures and games. Surely there is no other big toy company that could possibly compete well shit.
LEGO Dimensions answers the question of what can't be turned into LEGO. Dimensions, released in fall 2015, did generally favorable reviews, typically seen with a score around 8 from the few review sites that covered it. Dimensions was similar to other LEGO games with the linear level design and the main story, but instead of focusing on one licensed property, LEGO Dimensions featured playsets of over 30 franchises. Not only did this introduce more playable characters, but it had explorable open worlds for that character's franchise. The Toys to Life functionality is what you'd expect in terms of playing as the figure's character, but Dimensions adds a new twist. With Skylanders and Disney Infinity, you had your portals and playpads and doodads. But LEGO said, fuck it, build it yourself. Yes, this portal is actually buildable, and believe it or not, this does serve a little bit of a purpose in the plot of the game, and I use the term plot very loosely. These purple plates actually represent different functions that the toy pad can do, and are progressively added to the portal through the game. This is a really good utilization of the toy pad in my opinion, as it's not as simple as slapping a character on there and just playing as them. Rather, the toy pad has more than one function and is part of the strategy used to solve puzzles in the game. Say the left side gives you electrical powers and the right side gives you fire powers. Depending on what side you place a character on, that character gets the corresponding elemental ability.
Like I said, LEGO Dimensions featured characters from 30 media franchises, and that spectacle should not go unnoticed. This is even reflected in the starter pack where you're given Batman, Wildstyle from the LEGO Movie, and Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. As you can see from my collection, I love this game's idea and struck while the iron was hot. If you ask me, my favorite one has to be the Midway arcade set. The level features a few references to old arcade games, which is really cool to me. I'm sure you all expected me to say that Sonic had my favorite level, but I haven't been able to play it. Sadly, I couldn't download the update file to my Xbox, since it has a tiny amount of storage on it. However, what I will say is that Sonic being present in LEGO form at all is pretty awesome. I hope we see more LEGO crossovers with video game franchises someday, because I think that has a lot of potential. Now we know for sure that we've hit all the bases in the Toys to Life market. We had Skylanders bring the concept to life, no pun intended. We had Disney push the Toys to Life concept further with the integration of media franchises. We had Nintendo throw their hat in the ring as a gaming industry veteran, and we had LEGO push the boundaries of what media properties can be included in the Toys to Life genre. So one question remains: why did Toys to Life die? Well, I kinda said it at the start of this video. It was just a fad. You see, the spectacle of having collectible figures that represent playable characters was so cool. However, with how the industry progresses, that excitement fades pretty fast, leaving consumers fatigued with the concept. Combine the shelves being lined up with all sorts of figures with the fact that every Toys to Life game is fundamentally the same, and you've got a recipe for a fad that lasts 5 years at best. People didn't want to pay $60+ for the game and shell out additional money for more characters, especially when more characters were mandatory to access bonus parts of the game. So, to put it simply, it was burnout that killed Toys to Life. While it's fun to joke about how the original Skylanders goes for under $10 on eBay, it's also nice to take a trip down memory lane. Say what you will about the financial model and how it practically made consumers bleed money from time to time. At the end of the day, these games weren't that bad. Whether you like the figures as collectibles or as tools to play the games that they're made for, you have to admit, these games were pretty fun. I know we won't see Toys to Life come back. It's way past its prime. But maybe someday I'll boot up my old Portal of Power and re-experience the magic that Skylanders used to be when I was a kid. One thing is for certain though, I probably wouldn't be so broke if I didn't buy so many of these dang figurines. Thanks for watching my Toys to Life video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a topic that I've been thinking about for a while and wanted to make a video about, so I'm glad I finally had this video made. So, if you enjoy content like this, I recommend leaving a like on the video. More importantly, subscribe so you don't miss stream VODs and other gaming content from me. If you want to talk with me about Toys to Life and other things gaming, join me on Twitch. Link is in the description down below. Following and making an account is totally free. But if you want to financially support the channel, subscribe on Twitch. It's only $4.99 a month. Well, that's gonna be it from me. Now if you excuse me, I need to check amiibo prices for a friend. I swear.